Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our daily word. Today is Friday, May 21st. It's a beautiful, breezy morning this morning. I'm here at the lake, getting things packed up after I'm done here and be headed home. It's graduation season, so I'll be at Fairlawn's graduation tonight, offering prayers, and be going to a lot of graduation parties this weekend, and also then preparing for worship on Sunday. We are celebrating Pentecost, and we ask everyone to wear red if you come to worship on Sunday. And then we're also celebrating confirmation, and we'll be confirming six youth on Sunday. And so we invite you to bring a card or a note or something to give to them. There'll be boxes in the narthex with their names on them. You simply drop a card or a welcome note in there to welcome them to the life of St. Paul's Church. So looking forward to all of that this weekend and all that it is that God calls us to as we share our lives together. So glad you could join me for just these few minutes this morning, this Friday morning. I've chosen for this morning because Sunday is Pentecost Sunday, and because Jesus, in his final discourse that we're going to hear on Sunday, promised the Holy Spirit to those disciples as he gathered with them. And then, of course, we're going to hear from the second chapter of the book of Acts when the Pentecost happens and the Holy Spirit comes as tongues of fire, and people spoke in these various languages, but they understood each other. And this was, for all intents and purposes, the birth of the church. And it was then following those days that folks began to gather and they began to share their lives with each other, and the gospel was preached, and they lived it out in amazing ways together. And so we're going to hear those words on Sunday as it affects our lives as we try to strive and be the church in all that we do. And so the text, though, for this morning comes from Romans chapter 15, verses 13. These are important words that we hear. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. So the writer of Romans says to us that the Holy Spirit is the source of hope in our lives, and that the Holy Spirit is the way to joy and then a path to peace. So we sometimes, I think, especially on Pentecost Sunday, we get caught up in the moment of flaming tongues about this big dramatic moment. And those who were around at that day, those who witnessed this big dramatic moment, that's how we sometimes characterize the movement of the Holy Spirit. But the Holy Spirit, as Jesus reminds his disciples, is the God of all moments. So if you remember when Jesus promised the disciples that when he was going to leave them, they wouldn't be left alone, but they would be given the Comforter, the Holy Spirit. And Jesus reminded them that in the days to come, when their life was difficult, when they struggled with things they had to do, that the Holy Spirit would then prompt them through their days, help them with their ideas that they had. The Holy Spirit would give them inclinations of what they ought to do. And the Holy Spirit then, as Jesus would describe it for the disciples, would give them an awareness of the choices that were set before them. So the Holy Spirit, as we know it, as we celebrate in the Sunday of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit is really the hint of the divine in our lives. And we then, of course, engage with the Holy Spirit and the power of God then by making choices that align with the spirit of who God is. So we all live in circumstances, and I've been reading a lot. People are beginning to look at their lives differently. Churches are beginning to reopen and thinking about their lives in a different kind of way these days, as we have at St. Paul's. And we have all these circumstances, and of course they're beginning to change a bit. But hope and peace and joy don't come through our circumstances. Instead, they come to us through the power of God. It's not that the Holy Spirit leads us to better circumstances, but that the Holy Spirit then teaches us what to do and how to perceive our circumstances. And it's in that, I think that we find peace and joy and hope in all of our lives. And here again, as we've had this conversation about how we share our lives with each other and what we've been talking about all these days, today's number 294. The Holy Spirit, as is described in Romans and as Jesus talks about it, what happened in Pentecost, in the Holy Spirit, we find peace and hope and joy, but it's not just for ourselves. You see, it's as a testimony, then I believe, for others to see. When we overflow with hope and peace and joy, it spills onto others and it affects the world around us. So, if we want to transform our lives, we don't need to transform our circumstances. But what we need mostly is to transform our perspective and then to choose to trust in the God who yields God's power in all the circumstances of our lives. And I think that's an interesting way for us to look at how it is that the presence of God and the power of God moves in our lives and then shapes us and calls us to be God's people. And so on a Sunday morning, we'll celebrate Pentecost. We're going to sing great hymns as we celebrate Pentecost together. We're going to share in prayers, and then we're going to go through the liturgy of confirmation, the affirmation of baptism, with these 6 youth and their parents. And for me, the act of confirmation is indeed the power of the Holy Spirit within the midst of our lives. Then we have the opportunity then to share in the lives of these 6 young people and their parents and their family and friends who gather. And the Holy Spirit then in that circumstance moves in us, and then our lives are shaped and changed, and joy overflows because of that. I've said that, and I told the parents, and I said the other day, this act of confirmation, this rite of what we're going to do on Sunday will take most of worship, and that's really okay. There's not a need for a big long sermon about Pentecost. There's not a need for all this other stuff. What there's a need for is us to recognize that in the lives of these 6 young people, the Holy Spirit moves. In the lives of their circumstances, we have the potential through the power of the Holy Spirit to continue to shape their lives. And if there's a better thing for us to do, I'm not sure what it is on Pentecost Sunday. And so for you and I, when the writer of Romans says to us, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. May we be overflowing with joy and peace as we trust in God through the power of the Holy Spirit. And that our circumstances, wherever we find ourselves, and whatever it is that God's calling us to, or wherever we are in our lives, the Holy Spirit then is a testimony that flows out of us and flows into the lives of others. And then, as I've always said, for all of these days, it affects then the world around us. And, if we do that, I think then we've answered the call to be God's people. And that's then the power of the Holy Spirit, that flows through you and flows through me, and the lives of the 6 young people and the lives of their families and those of us who will gather on Sunday. And so our circumstances, whatever they are, they don't need transformed. What needs transformed is our perspective. And to make the choice, then, you and I, to trust in a God who yields God's power in all the terrains and circumstances of our lives. And if we live that way, if we just take advantage of it, if we can see God's presence in all that we have and in all that we do, then our circumstances then are changed and enhanced, and then it flows on to others. So I pray you'll have a great weekend as you too celebrate graduations and Pentecost, and join us for worship on Sunday as we celebrate confirmation. I pray you'll know peace and joy and hope in your lives. I pray you'll know mercy and grace. I pray you'll know the power of the Holy Spirit that transform your circumstances, and then moves in us and overflows from us to change the lives of those around us. So, it's a great Friday. It's been a great week. Enjoy the beauty of today. Celebrate God's presence around you. And I look forward to seeing you Sunday morning at 10:15, either in person in the sanctuary, or you can join us via Facebook Live. Thanks for being with me today and for being with me this week. Luckily, we've been able to accomplish 5 days this week. So, know of God's love for you and know of my love for all of you. And I'll look forward to seeing you Sunday morning at 10:15, and then back here again on Monday at 10 o'clock. Have a great day and a great weekend.